Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today we are moving on to a new topic, topic D, and we are going to be continuing with our fractions, but we're going to be introducing something called a line plot. And line plots are used to organize large quantities of data. So that's what we're going to be doing, is organizing a large quantity or large amount of data. So today I'm not going to do any on my own. I'm going to start right away with my green pen and you're going to be joining me. So it says Miss Song records the number of miles she walks each day for a month. Her results are in the calendar. So each day, this is how much she is walking. The numbers here are just representing the day of the month. So on the 1st, she walked 2 5/8. On the 17th, she walked 2 3/4. Okay, the first thing we want to do with our data is we want to have a common denominator. So if I look at my denominators in my data, I have 8, 8, 2, 4, 4, 2, 2, 4, 8, 8, 8, 4. And when I keep looking, I see nothing but denominators of 2, 4, and 8. So I want to ask myself, what's going to be the least common denominator for those three? So I could list out my multiplication tables or my multiples, or I know that my smaller ones fit perfectly into my large one. So I know my common denominator is going to be 8. So I want to change all my data to have a common denominator of 8. So this one is already good. This one's good. 2 1/4 I want to change to have a denominator of 8. So what happened to the 2 to become an 8? Well, it's hard to write all the information here, but it was multiplied by 4. So I'm going to do 1 times 4, and I'm going to say 4. So 2 1/2 is equivalent to 2 4/8. Okay, here, this is not ready, so we want to change it to 1 blank/8. So what happened to the 4 to become an 8? Well, it's multiplied by 2, so I want to multiply this by 2, and I'm getting 6. Okay, so once I do some, I can kind of do a shortcut. So if I see that the 3/4 is going to become 6/8, I know that the 2 3/4 are going to become 2 6/8. And here, when I have 1 1/2, well, I know 1/2 is the same as 4/8. So 1 1/2 is going to be 1 4/8. Okay, this one's already the same. So I don't have to keep figuring them out. I just need to write them in. So that's 2 4/8. Well, 3/4 is 6/8. So that's going to be 2 6/8. That one already has an 8, already has an 8, already has an 8. Oh, 1 1/4. We haven't done that yet. So how many 8s would that be? Well, 4 times what equals 8? 4 times 2. So 1 times 2 is 2. Okay, we already said that 3/4 is the same as 6/8. So let's change this to 2 6/8. This already has an 8. That's a 2. Okay, 1/2 we said is the same as 4/8. So we can change that one. 3/4 is the same as 6/8. So we can change that one. An 8's already good. 1/2 we said is the same as 4/8. So I know there's a lot of data here. That's why we use line plots. 1/2 is 4/8, so let's change that to 1 4/8. That one's good. 1/4 we said is the same as 2/8. That is already 8, that's 8, that doesn't have 1. 1/2 is 4/8. 1/2 is 4/8. 3/4 we said is 6/8. That one's good and that one's good. So that's a lot of work, ladies and gentlemen, but that's the first step, is I want to take all my data and have the same denominator. Whenever you're adding or subtracting or even comparing fractions, we want to have the same denominator. Okay, so now let's use our data to answer some of our questions. Okay, so here's our first question. How many miles did Miss Song walk on the first Monday of the month? So the first Monday of the month is right here. And she walked 2 4/8 miles. What is the longest distance Miss Song walked? So what's the longest? So kind of go through. This week, the longest was 2 7/8. Is there anything bigger? Nope. Another 2 7/8, but nothing bigger. Another 2 7/8, but nothing bigger. Okay, so the longest she walked was 2 7/8 miles. Okay, what is the shortest she walked? Okay, so in this week, the shortest was 1 6/8. Oh, we have a shorter one, 1 4/8. We have a shorter one, 1 2/8. I'm sorry, 1 1/8. We have anything shorter than 1 1? Nope, we have another 1 1/8. So our shortest was 1 1/8. Okay, on which day did Miss Song walk 1 3/4? Well, we changed all of ours to eighths. So 1 3/4 is equivalent to how many eighths? Well, 4 times 2 is 8, so 3 times 2. So we want to know, what day did she walk this? So let's look up here at our, she walked that on Friday the 4th. So our answer would be Friday, and we don't know what month it is, so we could just say the 4th. Okay, so again, lots of data that we're using to answer our questions. Okay, turning to the next side, we're still using our same data. It said, how many days did Miss Song walk at least 1 3/4 miles? So at least 1 3/4 means that 1 3/4 or more. Okay, so let's go through here, and I might maybe circle the days. So there's, that was more, at least, that's at least. That is 1 3/4, because 1 3/4 was, I should have written it on here, 1 6/8, because we already had found that. So that's at least, that is not, that's less. 1 4/8 is less. That's at least, yes. That's more, nope, that's less. 1 2/8 is less. That's more, that's less, more, that's less, more, and more. Okay, so how many days did she walk at least that? 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8 9 10 11 12 13 14 15 16 17 18 19 20 21 22 23. So our answer would be 23 days. Okay, our next question is, did Miss Song usually walk more or less than 1 3/4 miles? Well, if she did it on 23 days, that's going to be, then she usually walked more than 1 3/4 miles. Okay, this is where we're getting to our new topic, ladies and gentlemen. It says, use the data in the calendar to create what they call a line plot. So we're creating a line plot. So the first thing we want to do is we want to find our smallest or our shortest distance. So our shortest distance, and they actually had us write it down here, is 1 1/8. So that's going to be our shortest distance. Now they did these little lines to say that this isn't going to be to size or to scale. So we're going to start with 1 1/8 is our shortest distance. And then we want our line plot to go to our longest. So they had already asked us what our longest is, which is 2 7/8. So that's going to be our line plot from our shortest to our longest. Now, because it's eighths, I'm counting by eighths. You might even want to do this, make sure you're in pencil in case you make mistakes, okay? So what would come if I'm counting by eighths after? It's going to be 1 2/8. And then I might do my line down here so I have room to write it. 1 3/8. 1 4/8. 1 5/8. And notice I kind of stagger my lines so I can write my number. 1 6/8. 1 7/8. And 1 8/8, which is the same as 2. Okay, then we have 2 1/8, 2 2/8, 2 3/8. I'm going to have to squish them. 2 4/8. 2 5/8, and I just fit them, ladies and gentlemen. 2 6/8, and then there's 2 7/8. So if you need to pause the video to get all of yours in, you may, but I counted by eighths. So 1/8, 2/8, 3/8, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and those were all one whole. And then I go to 2 wholes right here, and then 2 1/8, 2 2/8, 2 3/8, 2 4/8, 2 5/8, 2 6/8, and 2 7/8. So when I'm making a line plot, I started with my smallest piece of data, and I went to my largest, and then I had to count in order. Okay, this is where it's going to become kind of a lot. So a line plot is made of X's. So each piece of data is going to be an X. So I'm going to be flipping my papers back and forth. So my first piece of data is 2 5/8. So I'm going to cross it off, and I'm going to put an X on 2 5/8. So if you see that was 2 5/8, I put an X. So this X represents this piece of data. Okay, my next one is 2 7/8. So I'm going to put an X. And the reason I'm crossing them off is so I don't make a mistake and forget them. My next one is 2 4/8. So I'm going to put an X on 2 4/8. Okay, then we have 1 6/8. So we're going to find 1 6/8 and put an X. And 2 6/8. I'm going to put an X. I'm going to go kind of fast. 1 4/8. 1 4/8. 2 4/8. 2 4/8. 2 6/8. 2 6/8. 1 7/8. 1 7/8. 2 5/8. 2 5/8. 1 1/8. 1 1/8. 1 2/8. 1 2/8. 2 6/8. 2 6/8. 1 3/8. 1 3/8. 2, which is 2. 2 4/8, 2 4/8, 2 6/8, 2 6/8, 2 7/8, 2 7/8, 2 4/8, 2 4/8, 1 4/8, 1 4/8, 1 1/8, 1 1/8, 1 2/8, 1 2/8, 2 5/8, 2 5/8, 2 7/8, 2 7/8, 2, 2, 2 4/8, 2 4/8, 2 4/8, 2 4/8, 2 6/8, 2 6/8, 1 7/8, 1 7/8, 2 1/8, 2 1/8. And take a huge sigh of relief or a huge breath. That was a lot. Now, a lot of times I like to even double check that I counted all of them. So I should have 30 X's. I might go back and check them. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. That's just a way to double check that I made them all. So those X's represent all these pieces of data. Okay, so now we're going to use our line plot to answer some questions. So my first question is, what is the most frequent distance Miss Song walked? So look here, and I can clearly see that this row, or this column I mean, has the most pieces of data. And that column goes to 2 4/8. That's the most frequent or most common. How many miles did Miss Song walk on the 3rd Saturday of the month? Okay, so that does not show it on here, so I need to go back to this and see it. The 3rd Saturday would be, that's the 1st, that's the 2nd. The 3rd was 2 4/8. Okay, what is the difference in miles between the longest, oh, this is the longest, and the shortest distance? So what is the difference? So they want us to subtract our longest and our shortest. Okay, so they already both have the same denominator, so we don't need to make them have the same denominator. So I have 7 take away 1. I can do that, and that's 6/8. And 2 take away 1 is 1. So it's 1 6/8. Okay, and our last question is, how many days did Miss Song walk less than 2 miles? Okay, so let's look at our data. Less than 2 would be if I took our data, here's 2. It doesn't say including 2, it says less than 2. So they want to know everything on this piece of our data. That's all less than 2. So how many days was it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So 10 days she walked less than 2 miles. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, I know that was a really long video. Your homework tonight is also quite long. So you have not as many pieces of data, but you have 12 pieces of data that you're going to want to find a common denominator for. Then you're going to make your own line plot, starting with the smallest piece of data and the largest piece of data, and then making an X for each one. And then afterwards, you have 3 questions to answer. All right, have a wonderful evening. Good night.